Think about the very last time you hired someone. Or actually, even the last time you were hired yourself. What exactly got you in the door? It was your resume, right? Well, how often have we all seen a totally stellar resume fail to translate into actual real-world success? Today in this explainer, we're unraveling a pretty fascinating case study that looks at exactly that. We're going to see why relying on a resume alone can be incredibly risky, and how getting the right data can literally turn a good hire into an absolute game changer.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. The CV suggested experience. The assessment confirmed fit. Honestly, this is the core premise of our whole story today. Because a resume, no matter how glowing it is, really only tells half the story. It tells us what a candidate has done in the past. But an objective assessment? That actually tells us how they're going to do the work when the pressure's really on in your specific environment.
Section 1. The Executive Support Challenge. Let's set the scene for our story. We're looking at Meridian Consumer Group, which is a national consumer goods and distribution business. Now, they were facing what a lot of people might just brush off as a routine hiring task, which was finding an executive assistant for a really demanding finance director. But as you'll see in a second, there is absolutely nothing routine about executive support at this level. The stakes were incredibly high.
You see, there's often this huge gap between expectation and reality here. On one hand, you have this super common misconception that it's just diary management and admin. Honestly, senior leaders often severely underestimate these support roles. But what a finance director actually needs is an operating buffer and leverage. In a crazy busy finance environment, the right person absolutely protects the executive's time. They reduce operational noise, they manage incredibly complex priorities, and they handle highly confidential info. The wrong person? Well, they do the exact opposite. They create more work, they miss crucial details, and they kind of slowly become just another problem on the FD's already overcrowded desk.
So, I really want this to sink in for a second. This was not just an admin role, it was a leverage role. The appointment mattered so much because it sat literally right next to financial leadership. It required deep trust, precise judgment, and just flawless follow-through. Making the wrong hire here wouldn't just be some minor inconvenience. It would create massive friction and, honestly, potential disaster.
Section 2. Sarah Bennett. Good on paper. Enter our protagonist, Sarah Bennett. Her resume has just landed on the hiring manager's desk at Meridian, and to be honest, it looks absolutely flawless. So let's look at exactly what the hiring team was seeing.
Her track record is just intimidating in the absolute best way possible. She's got extensive experience supporting CEOs, CFOs, and executive teams. She has handled board and committee support, which means she definitely knows how to operate at the absolute highest levels of corporate governance. She even has exposure to finance administration, compliance, and process improvement. Basically, her CV proves definitively what she's done. To anybody scanning through applications, she looks like an absolute slam dunk for the position.
But that brings us to a really crucial question. Does the person behind the CV actually match the role? I mean, experience is wonderful for sure, but the whole purpose of an assessment isn't just to repeat a candidate's CV back to the hiring manager. The finance director really needs to know how Sarah is going to execute under the specific, rigorous pressures of a demanding finance environment.
Section 3. The assessment beneath the CV. So this is where we transition from simply looking at past achievements to actively investigating future behavior. We're looking right beneath the surface of our paper champion to find the reality of the candidate. To do that, we have to deeply understand behavioral fit. Now, this isn't some test to see if Sarah is simply a pleasant person to be around. We are specifically testing for behavioral discipline. We want to know, does her natural working style actually align with the rigid demands of a highly structured financial environment? Because the role requires diligence, order, extreme detail, and incredibly high standards. We need to know if Sarah naturally operates that way, or if she'd have to constantly force herself to fit that mold, which, as we know, eventually just leads to burnout.
Well, when we map her internal traits directly to the external demands of the role, the evidence is pretty striking. Sarah naturally leans toward being careful, systematic, and incredibly rule-oriented. And in finance, where accuracy is basically non-negotiable and confidentiality is paramount, those aren't just minor personality quirks. They map directly to the strict governance of the job itself. Making mistakes here means wrong numbers or broken confidentiality. So her systematic nature and her orientation toward rules, those are literally the central pillars of doing this specific job well.
The assessment also showed us exactly how she handles pace. Sarah's not a fast executor who prioritizes speed at all costs. Instead, she's careful and persistent. Now, for a high-volume sales role, maybe speed is king.
But for an executive assistant to a finance director, careful persistence and diligent checking are so much better than rushing and making a highly consequential mistake. Speed just isn't the main requirement here. Trust, follow-through, and absolute accuracy are.
Section 4. Matching style to the job. As we get to the climax of this hiring decision, we have to look at the final watch points. Sarah is obviously a strong candidate, but a good assessment doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It provides a real roadmap for the actual human being you're bringing onto your team.
A truly great assessment doesn't just hand you a simple yes or no. It actually outlines specific management conditions for success. For Sarah, she needs clear expectations, explain priorities, define standards, and trust coupled with structure. Under intense pressure, she might actually become a bit anxious or overly thorough if things are ambiguous, so giving her absolute clarity is totally key. And let's be clear, these aren't reasons to reject her at all. They're highly practical management notes to make absolutely sure she succeeds from day one.
And because of that deep alignment and that clear roadmap, the final recommendation was a resounding appoint. Assessment is so often used defensively, basically just to avoid making a bad hire. But here, we're seeing the positive version of that. Assessment gives leaders the data-backed confidence to appoint someone when the evidence strongly supports the decision. The risk here was definitively low, the fit was incredibly strong, and the finance director could basically move forward without any hesitation. Section 5. Outcomes and lessons learned. Now for the most exciting part. Let's move into the resolution of our story to see exactly how this data-driven hire played out in the real world over at Meridian.
From day one, when her CV was submitted, to the behavioral assessment in week 2, Sarah's journey moved pretty quickly. By month 1, she was onboarded. And crucially, she was managed with the exact structure that the assessment had recommended. By month 6, she had built this deep, unshakable trust with the finance director. And then, by year 1, she actually enrolled in SEMA to study further in finance. And the craziest part? The assessment had predicted this. It showed she had the conceptual application, the problem-solving discipline, and the motivation to manage complexity way beyond routine admin. So this hire wasn't just a success, it was a literal launchpad for her career.
Which really brings us to the core lesson for all leaders, perfectly summarized by this quote from the case study. Assessment is not only useful when it says be careful, it is also useful when it says this evidence is strong. Clinical objective assessments drastically reduce your risk. They actually validate great choices for these high-leverage support roles. They confirm that the person on paper is the exact same person who will show up and flawlessly execute the job.
So I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. The very next time you have a stack of resumes sitting on your desk for a critical role, just ask yourself, are you hiring for what they've done or how they'll actually do it? Because as we've clearly seen with Sarah's story, when you can confidently predict the how, you don't just fill a seat, you create powerful, lasting leverage for your entire organization. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this helps you completely rethink your own hiring process.